please welcome back David Joe.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very. It's always nice to get the clapping, right? So, well, hey, thanks a lot. Very, very exciting remainder of the day for you with a couple of fantastic keynote speakers. I want to thank Reese Foods. I don't know if Kimberly Carroll and her team are in here, but Kimberly, thank you so much for the networking break. And how many people have driven the simulators? Anybody? All right, well, quite a few. Well, listen, it's a super cool thing to do that. I think you know it's just right outside the convenience store, so please take advantage of that. Let us know what you think. I want to thank Michael Bryan and Sarah Brendan from Growth Energy for doing that for us. USO, please keep stopping by the care desk if you haven't for sure, and if you have and you want to give more, that's always welcome too. And now, to get the afternoon started, it's a real pleasure to bring out a great friend of Outlook Leadership, the CVP of Convenience Store Sales of the Kraft Heinz Company. Please join me in welcoming Kathleen Bird.
Hello, Dave.
Okay, hi Kathleen.
Sorry, my hands are cold.
That's all right. I always run a little hot, so that was very good.
I'm cooling you down here.
No surprise. These lights are hot.
I know.
Kathleen, you have just been a terrific supporter of Outlook and convenience retailing for many years, and big brand with Kraft, and now a little change here now with the Kraft Heinz merger. Can you tell us anything about that?
Yes, David, I can.
Well,
so
very good.
Very excited. I'm getting used to our new name, Kraft Heinz, just like I'm getting used to your new name, Winsight. So, but really appreciate the opportunity to be here. And with Kraft, we've been on a fast and furious track. We've been in lots of newspapers. I'm sure you've read a little bit about us. We were acquired by 3G in July 3rd, I believe, of 2015. That's what year we're in. And so the last 120 days, we've been restructuring and reorganizing. Our new CEO, Bernardo Haas, has made some very dramatic changes, but with the optimism that we will be poised for growth in the CPG area in 2016 and beyond. So we're very excited about the changes. We're adapting to the new culture, and we look forward to the future.
Yeah, well, very good. I know I said a second ago, I mean, Kraft Heinz, some of the biggest brands in the world, and obviously very important to this industry. So are there new things for 2016? How do you see it continuing to grow?
Yes, we are. We actually, in fact, a lot of the changes that we are seeing within our structure is really poising us for innovation for the future. So we're very excited about our portfolio for 2016 and beyond. We're on both sides of the spectrum. We have the decadent side of life with some very positive, one of my personal favorites, I hope you guys will enjoy these in the near future, is Dessert Mix by Planters. We're also doing a lot in the organic space. So you'll see new entries coming into our stores as well in other channels within the industry within organic cheese, organic blue box mac and cheese. So we're excited to be introducing those. And then we also have some organic ketchup. So we're looking forward to it.
Organic ketchup.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
Hey, well, I'm excited about our next presentation, thanks to you. And one of the presenters is my former boss, my former business partner. And I know we've talked a lot about mentorship, and this individual certainly has been a great mentor to me. And I think it's appropriate that we just maybe bring him out for a moment and let you do the honors.
I would love to. Thank you so much. So it is my great pleasure to introduce my longtime friend and colleague, Paul Reuter, who will be joining me on stage here.
Come on out, Paul.
How about a hug? How about a hug? I don't want to shake your hand. How about a hug? David?
Okay, boss.
How are you, man?
It's great to have you up here. You know, the last time you were officially on stage with this group, you were interviewing two former presidents, President Bush and President Clinton. So you're back.
And I'm looking at that picture. I had more hair in my head that time, too.
Same color, though.
Same color? That light black color?
Yes.
So Now I'm with the president of the Leadership Conference Group and soon the president of Heinz Craft. So it's good to be with you both.
I aspire.
That would be terrific.
If I can put a good word in, I will.
Yes, will you please?
I'm not sure how it'll do with the MBO program. But.
Me either. I'm trying, though.
So Paul, I mean, I never felt you would ever retire, but you know, officially you're retired, so you probably are doing some things in retirement, and you're probably doing some things personal life and in business as part of the overall retirement.
First thing I did when I'm not retired.
Okay.
I don't think people ever retire. They just kind of move around and shift careers. You know, I thought I was old enough to take advantage of Medicare and AARP and Social Security. So I said, I got to go get those benefits. But, you know, before I talk about anything else, I really want to compliment you, David, and CSP, which is now Winsight, which is such an appropriate name for such a fast-track growth company. I'm not sure if people caught the fact that you bought Technomics the other day. Terrific acquisition. Watching what you all have done with the company since July of 12 when I left is just startling. They're all to be complimented. You know, having the first global retail conference in Dubai in 2016, October, wow, that's really great stuff. You know, so congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, no, I don't think retirement is something that most of us want to do. We change careers, we move on, we get some time on our hands, we go pursue other ventures, and that's what I've done both personally and in business.
Yeah.
You know, I've had the opportunity to spend more time with people I love and my grandkids and see the world. I've been to walk the Camino Santiago for 500 miles, which means if I do it, anybody can do it. Spent 3 months in Spain, Chile, South America, traveled across the country a couple of times in RVs, but you know, mostly have some quality time to do things that you want to do, but your cell phone and the next business meeting doesn't allow you to do.
Yeah, I want to just take a second. You mentioned about traveling cross country in the RV, and I just want to say, personally, I experienced that with Paul. You know, after Paul sold the company, and I'm going to take some time and I'll travel in this RV, and I'm going to come up to the Pacific Northwest. I live in the Seattle area. I said, well, that would be fantastic, Paul. I would really appreciate it if you'd like to come by and maybe spend a day or two.
Did you get the damage fixed yet?
At my home would be fantastic. So for those of you that know Paul, Henry, you would appreciate this. I'm not sure what the biggest RV is that you can get. I don't know if it's like 80 or 100 feet, but Paul pulls up, and my driveway is a little circuitous. It has a little bend to it, and then it comes out. It's big, right? But it has a little curve to it, and it's narrow. Well, Paul shows up at the top of the driveway and drives right down in this 800-foot RV. And I'm like, there's no way he's getting that back out. Well, he will, but it's going over all the plants and the grass and right over everything else. So
I wish you wouldn't have said that story. I won't get invited anymore.
Well, so needless to say, and you can imagine Paul on this big wheel, and he's up high, and it's like, I said to my wife, I said, sweetheart, I'm going to go to the gym, and you guys go ahead and back this out. And I came out, and you know, it rains in the Northwest. There's those big, deep tires. So.
Actually,
but anyway.
Called a landscaper?
Yes, it did. So anyway.
Actually, we were lucky that Roxy drove the RV out of the driveway. Otherwise, you would be telling a different story. You know, one of the last things I want to talk about is you know, you've had a mentor program, and that's a terrific program, and I congratulate you all for doing that. And I would suggest, I've been really fortunate in my life, and one of my mentors was Drayton McLean. Drayton still is a mentor, actually. And what he said, which I think was so instrumental in one of my changes, what he said, you know, when you get comfortable in life, you're probably not growing. You know, I try to encourage him to write a Drayton book because I think that's so true. And I think I got comfortable in this industry, but I stayed in this industry because this is such a fantastic industry. People say, why do you keep coming back? Because I never want to leave. Number one, I mean, that was the fun of our business. Still is the fun of the business. Today, I own a retail company. I did it as a business investment with Jim Feeney. Today, we're the largest franchise for 7-Eleven in the United States, closing on 20 stores in Madison and Milwaukee. where fortunately Jim lives and I don't. I live here in Paradise Valley. Second, we started a company with Dr. David Nelson, who most of you know, and Kay Siegel, who I've worked with for 20 years, called the Business Accelerator Team to help suppliers and other people. So, you know, it's been fun. And the fun part of it is it keeps me connected to you all. Because, boy, it's just an exciting time. I'm seeing Henry Dodge out there and so many of my good friends. So thank you for such a great career and such a great industry to work in. And thank you, David.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, Kathleen, Paul was fortunate enough to help convince another icon of the industry
Yes.
to join him, and I will leave that to you.
It's my great pleasure to introduce, yes, a great icon, longtime friend of the Convenience Channel, Jim Keys, now CEO and Chairman for Wild Oats and Fresh and Easy.
Come on out, Jim.
Great to see you.
Great to
It's
see
a
you.
pleasure.
Thank you so much, Jim. Thank
I
you,
will
Paul.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you.
All right. James?
Paul?
You know, I would say to you, first of all, thanks for coming. You notice that Jim and I don't have any notes, so we've already done this 3 or 4 times. And every time we make up something new, so who knows? No, seriously, thank you for coming. And, you know, one of the highlights of my business career as a publisher, journalist, et cetera, is meeting great leaders. You know, you really learn from other people. And I know we're going to get a lot to learn from you, Jim. You've got a terrific background, and we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about some of the vision that you have in this rapidly changing industry, both bricks and mortar and online and the rest. But before we do, I always think it's important to have people understand a little bit more about the person. So, Jim, the person, when you're not wheels are turning about business, which is probably only when you're sleeping, what do you do? What does Jim, the person, do? What are you all about?
Let's see, the wheels are always turning, so I don't know. You know, Paul, in fact, first of all, I want to say hi to everybody. This has been, and thank you to everybody for your gracious welcome, because this is a homecoming for me. I haven't been around much of the industry for 10 years, and so I've gotten reacquainted with many old friends, and it's good to see everyone, good to be back. But after I retired from 7-Eleven, I guess, back in 2005 when we sold the company to Ito Yokoro at the time, you know, I thought, well, I'll just go, you know, develop the other
side?
interest, right, yeah. I always thought, you know how you always think your handicap would get really low after you retire? If I just had more time to play golf, I'd be really good at it. Wrong, my handicap went up. I confirmed that I'm terrible at golf. Went out, I thought, okay, well, I like to fly, so I'll go out and I'll just keep getting more and more ratings, and I went from a single engine to a twin and turboprop and a jet, and then I realized, oh, great, now I've been trained to fly a jet. I have nowhere to go. So I decided I had better go back to work.
So is that why you came here? Because you flew the jet yesterday? I saw you at Scottsdale Airport? You know.
No, in all seriousness, I think what I learned about myself is what I really enjoy most is what you guys are all living every day, the retail industry. I have time every once in a while. I go back to speak. I get invited to Columbia Business School, my alma mater, and I talk to these kids, and I'm talking about retail. They all want to be investment bankers, and they want to be consultants and all that stuff, and I'm saying, retailing is the most interesting profession you could ever have.
You bet.
Because it changes every day.
You bet. You know, I just got an ouch. You talked about flying. I remember we were in 2001 at an Outlook meeting, Jim. And
Out here. Hey.
we were up at the ranch taking people out that afternoon, and you told me you fly helicopters. And you said, Paul, when we were taking people on helicopter tours in the mountains, and Jim and I got in a helicopter. And about 3 hours later, I got in a helicopter again when I turned over the RV and broke 6 ribs. So I don't think I've been in a helicopter since.
And make sure that you turned over an RV. It was not a helicopter.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I turned over an RV. I went in a helicopter, you know.
Yeah.
Had 2 more lovely weeks in Phoenix. So, Jim, you know, you 7-Eleven, Blockbuster, Fresh and Easy, Wild Oats. Let's chat about some of that. But let's go back to your career before you became CEO, and then let's zero in on 7-Eleven, some learnings.
Sure. Yeah. That you know, I said that retailing is one of my loves. Well, you know, 7-Eleven really gave me that opportunity to experience retail and all aspects of retail. And you had asked me earlier, you know, what were my greatest takeaways from that, you know, 21-year history that I had at 7-Eleven. And I'd say it really came down to two things. One was an understanding that change is real, especially at retail. Just get over it. Things are going to change. The more you can embrace it, the more successful you'll be. And the other thing I learned at 7-Eleven is to be fearless, because, you know, you learn from your mistakes. And I'll share a quick story. When I first got to 7-Eleven, mid-'80s, things, they were flying high, very successful public company. I think they had 12 jets in the corporate fleet, growing like crazy. And then all of a sudden they did an LBO, many of you remember, in 1987, loaded up with $4 billion in debt at 16%. And in 1991, 7-Eleven was bankrupt. We filed, and I was a relatively young guy at the time. I went to John Thompson. I think you might remember John.
Sure, absolutely.
Former chairman of 7-Eleven. I said, John, I'm a young guy. Did I make a bad mistake here? I went from my first career at Gulf Oil. When they merged with Chevron, I had the opportunity to join 7-Eleven, but I thought, big mistake. I joined a bankrupt company. We're a failure. And he told me a story that is relevant to everybody in this room, is relevant to me still today, that I'd love to share with everybody. He said, Jim, I can't tell you if your career will be right here or not, but he said, I'll just tell you what my daddy told me. Joe C. Thompson, the founder of 7-Eleven, shared with his son John that in 1926, I guess it was, when they created their first business, it was an ice house. And by 1927, somebody had invented something called the Frigidaire. Put a pretty big damper on their business model, selling ice. But they had this guy named Uncle Johnny Green who talked to the customers, asked them what they wanted, and the customers told them they loved coming to the store for ice, and now they have a fancy refrigerator instead of an ice box, but they'd like bread and milk and eggs. So Uncle Johnny responded, and the lesson that John was sharing with me in that history of 7-Eleven was, he said, my dad told me that convenience wasn't about ice, and 7-Eleven, or the old Southland Corporation, wasn't about selling ice. It was keeping up with the constantly changing needs of the customer and whatever they see as convenient tomorrow. So your job is go out and figure out what that is, because I don't know what it is. Obviously, we're in Chapter 11. We missed the boat. We're stuck in a beer and cigarette world, and while those things are still relevant to a portion of the customers, we're not staying current. So I took that advice to heart, and I think it served me well.
You know, I think you did such a great job representing the convenience store industry at a time when we were not the darlings of Wall Street that we are today. You know, 7-Eleven was a public company. You were there selling to financial people pretty well. But if you look back, was it more difficult to run a public company than a private company? And what eventually took 7-Eleven back as a private company?
Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum. Private versus public. I think I'll share a little bit of the story about Blockbuster and how I got there and went there, et cetera, but the intention with Blockbuster was to change it back to a private company, to make the changes necessary to bring it to the digital world, because in the public markets, we had this challenge with 7-Eleven. The public markets are so focused on next quarter that it's really difficult to build a long-term strategy. So we were fortunate at 7-Eleven. We went to the street in 1991 when we reemerged as a public company, coming out of Chapter 11, and told the street we've got a 10-year plan here before we're really back. And the street didn't like that at all, and the stock was really struggling for a long, long time. But over a 10-year period, let's say from 95 to 2005, the stock went from $4 a share to 40. And the street did reward us eventually for continuity, for 40 quarters of same-store sales increases and improvement in earnings. But it's difficult when you are trying to execute a long-term plan in a public company environment to have the investors' patience, and that's what I found at 7-Eleven. Blockbuster was probably one of the biggest challenges. Had we taken Blockbuster private, I think we would have been fine. We ended up staying public, and that was one of the things, candidly, that led to the demise of Blockbuster. More than the emergence of Netflix or Redbox was the pressure from the public on the investments.
I want to jump into Blockbuster in a minute, but I want to stick with 7-Eleven, if I might. You know, arguably the largest, or one of the top 3 largest brands in the world. If you look back, and it may be I don't want it to be an arrogant statement, but you know, the consumer, when they have been interviewed over the years, when they think of convenience, they think of 7-Eleven. It's kind of one and the same because the largest and the age and a lot of stuff. But if you look at the influence of the global environment for 7-Eleven, particularly Japan and Singapore with the technology, when you look back at that, can you say that made a major difference in the United States and maybe made a major difference to the industry? Can you hang your hat on a couple of those things?
Yeah, I'll share a story. One of my favorite was back in 1991 when we first, 7-Eleven Japan, Ito Yokoro at the time, came in as an investor in 7-Eleven. We were still the worldwide licensee, but they were a licensor. They were our largest licensee at the time and bought an interest in 7-Eleven and allowed us to come back out of bankruptcy and then refile to be a public company again. So I had an opportunity to go now with my largest shareholder, 7-Eleven Japan, and visit with them. And some of you may have met Mr. Ito, who's now, I guess, in his 90s. He was in his 70s, I guess, at the time, and he met with the senior management team, and he asked us to describe the 7-Eleven of the future. And we all, of course, drew a picture of what the store would look like 10 years. And they all laughed. And then he handed us a book. And the book was called The Machine That Changed the World. And it was about the automobile industry. Now, you know, many of my peers at the time, you know these guys, they were, you know, kind of crusty old guys. They'd been around 7-Eleven for a long time. They thought, the old guy's nuts. Gave us a book about cars. This got nothing to do with retail. What's he thinking? I was young enough, crazy enough, I guess I actually read the book. And it turned out that it was a great analogy, because what the book was about is that the U.S. automobile companies looked at the success of the Japanese companies, and if you remember the first efforts that the U.S. auto manufacturers made, they just took the same old crappy American car and shrunk it down. Said, now, here's what customers want. They like these Japanese cars. We'll make them small, like them. And the point of the book is that what made the Japanese automobile industry successful is they re-engineered the industry part by part, literally trying to figure out how to get just-in-time delivery of parts, the lowest possible cost and the highest quality, et cetera. And they rebuilt the whole industry from the inside out. And he laughed at us because we designed the store from the outside in. So the moral of the story there was that the lesson I had from 7-Eleven Japan is that they had reinvented their definition of convenience product by product, while we were still out trying to acquire stores and just looking at external factors. And they literally redefined the product assortment item by item for the customers. Great learning.
I'm wondering why you stay on Japan. Is there something that they do, other parts of the world do, that maybe the U.S. lags in, that we need to catch up and go back? You know, we used to export convenience for most of the history of the C-store business. Now we're importing a lot of ideas for a long period of time also as the level field has changed. But when you look around the globe, and you did at that particular time, something we need to catch up to?
Yeah, I think, you know, the thing that I'd say was the most important in terms of the secret sauce that they had. I attribute it to timing, because they started their franchise of 7-Eleven 40 years ago just as scanning became popular. And we were still with old Noran cash registers, you know, no electronics or anything. We had no way to collect data. What they discovered is how to harness technology as an enabler for retail. So that, in other words, you see too many retailers today. Walmart's a great example. Tesco, my friends across the pond, when they built Fresh and Easy here in the United States, copied the concept of convenience retail that they saw in Japan. A commissary, a bakery, a daily distribution network, truck in every store every day, a small store, footprint store, large density. And then they made the huge mistake of overlaying on that business a big box technology. So they, instead of the item by item focus and the use of data to make more informed decisions at point of sale in the hands of the retailer, the big box mentality was, well, this works great for us in the UK, so we'll just have automatic replenishment. We'll take the thinking out of the store. And the one thing the mistake everybody makes when they try to build a small box store is that they underestimate the importance of that operator, knowing that there's a football game on Friday night or a parade this weekend down the street, and the ability to respond to those local changes. So the net learning that I had from what I've seen in Europe and in Asia is the use of technology to empower retailing in a way that we've never seen before, not to take thinking out, not to bypass it and go to home delivery necessarily, but just to make a retailer a better retailer.
So when you go through this period of time, you're at 7-Eleven and the rest, it's always interesting to look at some of the things that didn't work so well. You know, there's some good learning in that too, right? We always want to hang our hat on success. Is there one that you can say, boy, that was a big hiccup, but boy, what did we learn from it?
I've had a lot.
I didn't tell you I was going to ask you that question, did I?
No, you didn't.
No, I know.
That one.
It's all right. I don't want to keep you, you know.
You know, I'll tell you what one of my biggest takeaways were, because I remember sitting in now that you're a franchisee, I remember sitting in a franchise meeting, national coalition meeting, I believe it was. My predecessor had dinner rolls thrown at him on the podium. I thought, oh, that's bad. I don't think that's good. I don't know if I want that job. And my learning over the tenure that I had was that the franchise system can be amazing, can be very powerful, an incredibly powerful tool. But at the end of the day, every individual store has to stand on its own, and it has to be able to be profitable on its own. And if it isn't, then the whole enterprise will suffer for it. So I used to affectionately call my franchisees some of them are in the room, so don't take offense, but they're the canaries in the mine, right? The miner would take a canary into the coal mine. If the canary started to sing, we got problems, we got to get out of here. And the nice thing about a franchise system is, if you do something that's harebrained at corporate, sounds like a good idea, but it really doesn't work at store level, the canary's going to sing. The franchisee will start to talk about it. Or a corporate store manager, somebody getting a paycheck may just go, well, you know, they're the boss, what the heck, I'll do it even if it fails. Franchisee won't let you do that. And if you listen and work together, then you'll be able to find good solutions.
You know, it was interesting. Yesterday I sat next to Steve Sheets, who I consider one of my mentors also, and Chet Cadjo, who I didn't know as well but knew him, but certainly his father well. And I'm thinking of 7-Eleven stores and Quick Trip and Sheets. You can get pretty intimidated. But I also think one of the competitive advantages you just mentioned in understanding the franchise community is that person that puts down their money and runs that store and works the local community. Because, you know, we all know what 7-Eleven looks like, and we know what Sheets and Quick Trip look like. No offense. I own some of them. And, but it is that locale, it is that manager, it is that new American that is an entrepreneur who works the local customer, works damn hard to make a paycheck. Jim, part of retailing certainly that you moved into was, okay, so 7-Eleven, we want to talk about the future in a minute, but Blockbuster, what was that all about? How did you get there?
All right, so after going through I'm a terrible golfer, and now I can fly a jet, but I don't know where to fly. I decided I really do like this thing called work, because it really wasn't work at all. It was really an enjoyable vocation that I found myself in, and I looked around to see what I could do next, and I thought I needed a change, but I didn't want to stray too far from convenience retail. So I saw the entertainment industry, and not just video entertainment, media entertainment, but also electronics and the use of electronics. I saw that as sort of the next wave of convenience. Because when I'd go into an Apple store that were just emerging at the time, So, wow, this is great. It's a convenience store for electronic stuff. I can get all my favorite content and software and hardware, and I've got somebody called a genius across the counter that can explain it all to me. So wouldn't that be cool if we had a technology agnostic Apple store? So I can take my BlackBerry that I've just now reluctantly given up. I had to pry it out of my hands. And my IBM computer and my Sony TV, and I can make them all work, just like I make a Mac and an iPad and an iPhone work together. That was the concept, and we ironically started to chase Radio Shack as the target. Radio Shack was struggling. Thought, here's a lot of small box locations. They've kind of lost their way in terms of being relevant in electronics. So maybe we buy Radio Shack, try to convert the base business, and then acquire Blockbuster, bring the two together, and create this new approach so that every time you bought a mobile phone or an iPad or anything, it would come with Blockbuster content baked inside. That was the idea.
Well, what happened?
Well,
That's so good.
You know, it started out as a great idea, we thought. As I said, public versus private. I was on the road trying to sell to investors the idea of acquiring Radio Shack. One of those investors also had an investment in Blockbuster and picked up the phone right in front of me and said to Carl Icahn, who was one of the largest shareholders of Blockbuster at the time, you got to talk to this guy Keys, he's got an idea. Yeah. So 10 minutes later, I'm in Icahn's office, and he said, all right, so I like the idea, let's forget about this Radio Shack thing. They just brought in a new CEO, and the stock's going up, so let's forget about that. Let's buy Blockbuster, and then we'll go pick up another consumer electronics company, and we'll be fine. And Carl was, and I said, Carl, we got to take it private. The street is not going to understand this. At the time, people weren't streaming movies. You know, we weren't watching content on our phones, on airplanes, or our iPads. It just wasn't there yet. We saw it coming, but the street wasn't there. So I said, we got to take it private. And he was like, no, you're crazy. Public versus private, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. You just run it. I'll do the financial stuff. Okay. So we kept it public, and sure enough, about a year in, we had doubled EBITDA. We were making really good progress. We bought a digital streaming company. We had lined up an opportunity to buy all the content that Netflix now streams. We would have had it exclusively. We had all the ducks in order. And then we tried to make a run on Circuit City. Didn't go so well. The street didn't like that so much. 2 bricks strapped together, thrown in a pond, the street called it.
So you know, brick and mortar retailing. Yesterday, Tom Blishock talked about disruption in 2035. I think there's disruption going on today, and I know Tom knows that. As you look at brick and mortar retailing and you look at your history, and now Fresh and Easy and Tesco, I mean, we all wrote about Tesco. We thought it was the next, you know, wave of competitive retailing, certainly convenience retailing. The takeaways from Tesco, I mean, the story will be interesting when it all gets said and done, and I know you've got some issues now you can't talk about, but the point you can, I'd be interested in, you know, your perspective on what was right in the thinking and maybe not so right.
Well, let's start there, and then I want to go back to Blockbuster because it's the same relevant story. That there's this notion that technology is going to take away the importance of brick and mortar, and I don't see that at all. I really believe there's a happy marriage between the physical presence of stores and product and the use of technology to make it easier to access those. It's just really all about convenience. And that was really the vision that Tesco had, to bring a lot of stores to define a new kind of convenience retail by, instead of relying so heavily on traditional convenience products, tobacco, cigarettes, et cetera, that you would be able to facilitate a full shop, 3,000 to 4,000 SKUs, and fresh foods and sandwiches and salads and all the other things that we sell, but you'd be able to facilitate that in a small box. Should have been ideally 3,000 square feet. They built 10,000 square feet, which was probably more of a grocery store than it was a convenience store. And so the concept was sound, that you'd have this ability to use technology to do that. And I'll share with you in a minute, I'm going to come back to Fresh and Easy, because there's a next generation use of technology that I think really makes that brick and mortar more relevant than all of these other guys like Amazon Fresh that are trying to do it today, home delivery. But go back to Blockbuster for a second. The idea that stores needed to be replaced for consumer electronics didn't seem to be relevant. The street believed that technology was going to eliminate the need. But if you think about what the street was doing, they were defining Netflix at the time as a technology company. Netflix was doing DVDs by mail. That wasn't technology. It's still the same old DVD. They were just, you were ordering online and they were mailing it to you. The idea of streaming was all well and good, but you couldn't get to streaming until you had the manufacturers be willing to bake your application into every one of their devices, every TV, every mobile phone. So the concept eventually of stores like you see now at AT&T, imagine trying to use your cell phone without having the AT&T store or the Verizon store to go to understand how to use the apps, or the Apple store to understand how to link them all together. That was the concept. And to me, it's still very relevant that, yeah, I can do a lot with technology, but I still like that physical presence of a store, whether it's an AT&T store, a Verizon store, an Apple store, to give me that extra personal touch that makes that technology come to life.
But you see all the data that everybody else sees, millenniums, the change, the technology, people are going to do this, that, and the other thing, Uber, all the things we know that are happening in the world. So would you bet on a fresh and easy concept in the future?
Yeah, the reason I got excited about Fresh and Easy wasn't the stores. I think the stores were the wrong size, wrong technology, et cetera, et cetera. But I got excited about the idea of modern convenience. And here's why. I mentioned Amazon Fresh. We had a test in 3 stores, something called Amazon Prime Now. Mm-hmm. They would put people in the store, 2-hour delivery, full grocery shop, or lunch, whatever you want, free. That kind of service to me is convenience retail. It's just another definition of convenience retail. If John Thompson was here on the stage with me, he'd say, you know, my father would have said, you better get on that because it's a more convenient way for people to access the product. But here's the problem that all of these companies are going to have. How do you get all that inventory to within an hour of everybody's house? There's only 2 ways. The old web van where you put a big box outside and you have to stick it in a box like the old milkman, doesn't work so well, or somebody has to be home, doesn't work so well. If you truly want convenience, you have to be able to deliver a full shop within 1 hour. Now, how many retailers have enough stores that they're within 1 hour of everybody's house with 4,000 SKUs? To me, that's an opportunity because you can have a next generation form of retail store that, you know, maybe doesn't carry as much of the traditional convenience items as we have today in what we would define as convenience, maybe can support more of a full shop because all you need is about 3,000 to 4,000 SKUs. And if you have broad enough distribution of that model, then partnering with someone like an Amazon Fresh or even Uber to do that last mile delivery can truly facilitate the ultimate in convenience, which means I can get the product any way I want. I can either go to the store because I'm in the neighborhood and I'm on my way home. I can order it online and stop and pick it up. Somebody can run out and put it in my car. The kids never have to come out of the car seat. Or if I'm too lazy to get out of the house, I just go online and they bring it to me in an hour.
Well, that's what Tom was telling us yesterday about his Amazon being delivered by Uber to his house. You know, I'm going to Tom's house for cocktails Thursday, so I'm sure he'll some more of that. You had 2 fascinating stories while we have time that I want to make sure we hear. One is the whole concept of going into Walgreens. You mind telling that story?
Yeah, one of the things I've always been frustrated by, I was telling Paul the story that, I can admit this now because I'm no longer with 7-Eleven, but my wife used to go to CVS or Walgreens for convenience items, and I'd say, well, no, you got to shop at 7-Eleven. Come on, what's going on here? So why go to 7-Eleven if I'm going to buy you cigarettes or something? Anyway, it's a long time ago. I was always frustrated by the notion that the drugstores were the convenience store for females, and I didn't understand that, and they're still trying to be, and I think they do a particularly bad job of it. Because they've got the front end of most of the drugstores are not particularly convenient or well stocked with the right items. So the notion was, could you go into a drugstore and take that corner that has the photo processing now, which is obviously not a big mover these days, and replace that with a fresh food assortment and a couple of runs, maybe one chilled and a couple of ambient, to get that 3,000 SKUs in that store. I think it can be done. We were playing with that concept, and imagine particularly now with the Walgreens and Rite Aid acquisition, how many points of distribution they'll have, and the ability to actually fulfill that convenience need if they want to. Now, I think they're going to have a challenge executing that plan. It's not their strategic sweet spot, but I do think it's an opportunity if somebody can crack the code.
Well, I think it's a fascinating concept and has a lot of legs to it. The other subject, I was up in Boston this week actually, for the Sigma meeting, and the oil companies project, a lot of people project, keep pressing down the whole notion that electric cars will be a big deal. The only reason I bring it up is as it relates to modern convenience. So you were pretty excited about your Tesla. Why don't you tell us why?
Yeah, well, Paul knows I'm a bit of a car guy. I like to collect sports cars for the most part.
That's my red Porsche in front of the building.
Yeah, I know, that's nice. My Tesla could
I copied you.
My Tesla could beat that, though. I got to talk you into
No, it couldn't. No.
On a lark, I bought one of these crazy Teslas. I actually had bought the stock, and I said, well, if the stock goes up enough, I'll buy the car. I'll get the car for free. Sure enough, the stock, went up really fast, and I ended up fulfilling my promise to myself, and I bought one of these crazy things. And I see it, I don't know if anybody has an electric car today, but I see it as much a game changer in the automobile industry as the iPhone was to telephones or to mobile devices. It is astounding, the performance of this thing, the convenience of not having to go to the gas station is really astounding. But we were working with the Tesla people to think through, you're still going to need a top-off. Now, we get 250 miles, which is enough to get around town. I don't think I've ever really challenged that battery life and just around town driving. But a top-off is where they're heading, so they'd like to be able to have almost enough penetration that it's almost like a gas station, where if you are driving around town, you're going to burn through your 250 miles. You always have that notion, gee, an extra 50 miles would be good. It may take 15 minutes. What could I do? So we were playing with Tesla with this idea of building what would look and feel like a gas canopy, sort of Chevron meets Sonic, if you will. A gas canopy where you drive in, and there's the electronic screen there for ordering. And while you're waiting for your car to charge for 20 minutes, you could order lunch and have it delivered into your car. You could watch a Netflix movie on your big screen. You got a big screen that's all Wi-Fi capable. You should have been a Blockbuster movie, but now you could watch a Netflix movie. You could order a full shop.
Get your groceries.
Have your groceries just delivered into the back of the car. Again, the kids never come out of the car seat because, you're entertaining yourself in a different way than you would in the traditional gas station environment or petroleum environment. So, being an old Gulf oil guy, to me, that was exciting to think of the next generation of satisfying that same kind of need in a very different way. So the vision of this modern convenience that we were trying to paint was to say, imagine a small box store, 3,000 or 4,000 SKUs, fill-in shop or lunch, breakfast, dinner. It satisfies this sort of convergence between specialty retail, drug, convenience, and fast foods. It's a sweet spot right in that space. And instead of the traditional gasoline canopy, or you may have gasoline, but you may also have the electronic capability. This is probably 10 years down the road, but you might have that electronic capability with the ability to replace a Sonic, if you will, with the chance to have breakfast, lunch, or dinner served to you right in your car, or to do a fill-in shop while you're sitting there. It's an interesting notion. I don't know who will get there first or if it will ever happen, but that was the vision that we were trying to take what Tesco started, trying to take it to that next level.
You know, it's fascinating. Our industry has grown so much in sophistication and success. We've had a pretty good year this year in products and innovation, and yet, in many ways, our boxes haven't changed all that much. When you look at modern convenience, and you just given us some ideas, is there any message you would tell our sophisticated, growing audience?
You know, I ran into Gus, I ran into many Dennis, I ran into many old friends that are out there who are chasing this new form of modern convenience. They've made huge progress, huge strides. I think it will probably be the entrepreneurs that get us there. Candidly, I used to poke a little fun when I was competitors with Wawa and Quick Trip, and I know Chet's in the crowd somewhere, and I used to poke fun at them for their fresh food program. Fresh food program has come light years, and it's terrific now. I'm very proud of the accomplishments that the industry has made. So I think the industry will be just fine. It's moving in that direction. It's going to take a while for us to all change our physical plants because we're all, in many cases, saddled with, you know, older facilities and hardware. But I think we're evolving into that business, and it's fun to watch.
Yeah, it's a fascinating industry, the convenience store industry. It's the closest to the consumer. It's one of the largest. The independent's a vital factor in new ideas, as well as chains. We watched it over many years, many decades, actually. We keep reinventing ourselves. We, you know, have had thread after thread of Hillary Clinton and healthcare, and we can go on and on about it. We know it. But boy, the industry just keeps responding, you know. It's innovative. It's kind of like the expression, you are what you think you are, or what you can do. And you have done so much, and this industry has done so much. And it's because of leadership and good ideas and imagination and the belief that you can get that done. So we're out of time, but I want to thank you for taking the time with us to come here and fly that jet and share some ideas and see some old friends. So Jim, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jim.
David, thank you.
Thank you, Paul, so much. I really appreciate that.
Pleasure, man.
Okay. All right.